Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Week 18 Mega Preview presented by BetMGM. I'm Larry Hartstein. I am joined by RJ White. Only RJ today. Emery off on assignment. RJ has twice cashed in the world's most prestigious handicapping competition, the Super Contest this year. He's holding at 49, 35, and 1 in circa million. Probably not going to be enough to cash, though, right, RJ?
No, not going to be enough to cash. I think I'm 3.5 points out. So even if I go 5-0, there's not going to be enough people that come back to the pack to cash. So disappointing. Had myself in great position to cash 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then just a string of 2 and 3s, 2.5, 2 and 1s, 3 and 2s, and just was not able to get there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, and I'm in the same boat with you, looking like a chance to bubble in that contest. But I should note, if you are checking out RJ's article every Friday on SportsLine, those picks 49, 35, and 1 very profitable. My best bets piece, which also comes out Thursday or Friday, 33, 17, and 1. So let's get right to it. We have 2 Saturday games, starting with the Steelers against the Ravens. The Ravens locked into the #1 seed. Clearly the best team in football. Actually, before we get to this game, RJ, what do you make the Ravens and 49ers in a potential Super Bowl rematch?
Right now, I make them pick them. I think the 49ers were clearly the best team in football for the longest time, and it feels like the Ravens are that team at this point. So I think it's hard to say which one you would make which. I know the Ravens dominated them in that matchup, so I would make it pick them. I would assume that the Ravens would be favored if it got to the Super Bowl there, and if that's the case, I would want to back San Francisco catching points.
Yeah, I saw an odds maker put out San Fran -2. That was following the debacle that the Niners had at home, but it was before Baltimore put up 56 points on Miami. They clearly look like the best team in football right now. Are they going to rest everyone for this game? In 2019, they were the #1 seed. They rested everyone. They came out flat against the Titans. John Harbaugh's been talking about that this week. Does that play into your handicap on this game? Obviously, the Steelers have to win. Mason Rudolph, 567 yards and 2 touchdowns, no picks. He looks great. How do you factor in the John Harbaugh and the resting starters?
Yeah, I know it was disappointing when they did it the last time and they came out flat against the Titans, like you said. I think they went down 14-0 in that game, never really competed, even though they put up a lot of stats. They put up nearly 500 yards of stats in that game, just 12 points. And you can blame the rust if you want. And John Harbaugh, I mean, he thinks about everything. He's the guy that will come out and do some crazy stuff on 4th down with a 2-point lead and run around in the back of the thing. You never know what to expect from him. He's thinking about everything. And so I know that's probably weighing on him. How much do you want to play everybody? Do you want to play anybody at all? I think they rest Lamar. I think that it's hard to rest a ton of other people, except for the people that are banged up. And we saw the team that went out with a few guys banged up in the secondary last week and really do a good job shutting down Miami's passing game. So I think that these cornerbacks can handle the Steelers' receivers a little bit here. You can only rest so many people. You can give some guys a little bit of a break and manage the snaps. But I do expect a good game from the Baltimore defense here, which is playing into the reason I have Baltimore plus 3.5 as a best bet. We know Tyler Huntley can play football. He's not going to come out and light up the scoreboard, we don't think, although we don't know with Todd Monken running the offense. But he did not, make a fool of himself in limited duty at the end of last year. And I'm confident that he can come in against a defense that hasn't been playing that well in the Steelers and have some success here. At full strength, I would make this line Baltimore minus 11.5. They're just so far clear of the Steelers, and they have home field advantage here. That I have them 9 points better than an average team, and I'm not really sure the Steelers qualify even as an average team. They're right there around a little bit below average for me. So when you take that into account, you swing the line 15 points in this case at 3.5. I just think that's too much to account for resting the quarterback, who's probably worth around 8 points for me. And then the rest of the guys getting a little bit of rest here and there, but it's not going to be too drastically different. So I think the Ravens should be favored in this game. I think it's kind of a gift we're getting the hook at plus 3.5. So that's why I have Baltimore as a best bet.
I like that look, RJ, and I believe it was Adam Chernoff, one of the great ones in this field, who pointed out that the preseason John Harbaugh does pretty well. So even when you're not playing your starters, they take it very seriously. And also, you don't want to sit everyone for 3 full weeks. That is a long time. It's different if you have to play next week, but now you have next week off. So I agree with you. I think we'll see some Ravens players, and I could only look at taking the points because Tyler Huntley was very, very capable. He's not a great quarterback, but he is capable, especially of running this offense. The next game, I have a clear lean on this one, but I haven't locked it in. This is a great game because both teams get into the playoffs with the win. The Texans visiting the Colts, and both teams would win the division if the Jags somehow lose to the Titans, which I don't think is going to happen unless they play a very badly injured Trevor Lawrence. Again, I think they should stick with Beathard, but we'll get to that game in a minute. CJ Stroud comes back. Nico Collins looks great. Will Anderson, though, comes back, doesn't play a full complement of snaps, completely blows up that game with 2 sacks. He looked great. To me, it's going to be Texans or nothing in this game. What about you, RJ?
Yeah, we got in on the Texans money line when the Colts were favored yesterday. I just thought the Texans clearly are the better team here. I think nobody would argue that they're the better offense when you got CJ Stroud and Nico Collins healthy against this Gardner Minshew-led attack. Definitely in backing the Texans in that sense. And then you look at their defense. Their defense just shut down Derrick Henry, and they allowed 3.5 yards per play, just 1 for 12 on third downs to Tennessee. And this Indy defense, not great. You know, they didn't get the cover there again against Vegas last week. A lot of people expected them to cover. The market was heavy on them. And that was the most points they've been laying all year at 3.5. They hadn't even been 3-point favorites. And they weren't able to cover. And I just don't know that they're that good as their record would indicate. And I'm pretty confident at this point that Houston is a valid 9-7 team. And I'm not sure about that for the Colts. So with Indy being so inconsistent week to week, if they win a game, I mean, they're capable of losing the next one by 20 or 30. They're just so tough to predict week in and week out. And I don't have that same concern with Houston. So this is a playoff game for both teams, as we know. They both were relatively similar. And when you look at yards per play differential last week against bad teams at home, but I'm worried about the Indy defense that allowed 5 yards per play against the Vegas offense that hadn't done anything the game before. And if this Texans defense is playing up to the level they showed last week, they could run away with this game. So I agree with the line move of it going through the 0 and now Houston being favored in most spots. I wouldn't be surprised to see it inflate a little bit more. Don't want to get it too much higher because I think then people will jump on the Colts, especially in teasers, to get the Colts up over a touchdown in teasers, expecting a close competitive game. But I agree with you that if you're going to back this game on the spread, you probably want to be on Houston.
Yeah, and as Emery might say, who do you trust in terms of the QBs? I trust CJ Stroud a lot more than Gardner Minshew, which is crazy to say because CJ Stroud is a rookie playing on the road here. But RJ, you got it at even money on the money line at SportsLine a couple days ago. But how far would you play this on the Texans?
Well, my power ratings say the Texans should be favored by only a half point. So right at 1, we're already looking at, the power ratings would say this is about the time to jump off. I'm just a little bit more confident in Houston in that. I think maybe it gets a 1.5. I'm still okay leaning toward the Texans, and at 2, it's probably too much.
Gotcha. Well, where are you going to play the Texans if you get the right number? Hopefully, BetMGM. BetMGM has all the action for every sports fan. New BetMGM customers, sign up today, get a first bet offer up to $1,500. If your first bet loses, you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Use bonus code EDGE1500. That is EDGE1500. Let's get to a big Sunday slate. Looking at a very interesting game with the Falcons and the Saints both still alive for the division if Tampa Bay somehow loses to Carolina. We see the Saints being 3-point favorites here. This was a little bit higher, so we're getting some Falcons money, even though we don't know if it's going to be Taylor Heineke, who has an ankle sprain, or Desmond Ridder. RJ, what's your take? Do you agree with the move on Atlanta?
I really don't. I think that the line should be 3. So if you're just playing by power ratings, sure, get the value at there and expect a close game that's going to be decided by a field goal. But it just seems like the Saints are playing like the better team right now. Atlanta's yo-yoing their quarterbacks up and down the depth chart. Less than 100 net passing yards last week against Chicago without that Tyler Algier 75-yard touchdown. It's not like that was a guy beating his man deep. It was just this little dump off pass with great blocking, and he took it all the way. So I don't think you really count on that as an explosive long play in this offense that's repeatable. And without that, they didn't do anything passing the ball. The New Orleans defense, however, just allowed 7 yards per play to Tampa. Most of that production came in the second half with New Orleans up big. They also had 4 takeaways, and we know, especially on the road, Atlanta has a problem giving the ball away. So if that New Orleans defense shows up, I don't think that they allow 7 yards per play to this Atlanta outfit, and I think they can get some takeaways and win this game by a margin here. In the first meeting between these teams, Atlanta's offense ran for a season-high 228 yards, and so that's got to be on New Orleans' mind. You have to have a better plan in place to stop them running the ball, because that's the only way they're going to beat you is shoving the ball down your throat, and you have to come in with a better game plan this time. The New Orleans offense, likely without Kamara, I think that's kind of okay, because Derek Carr had his problems with him this season. Don't think he executes well in the red zone. He's been playing well the last few weeks. He finally looks healthy. He dealt with injuries midseason, and I think the pass offense may be able to carry the team in this matchup. So even though the number felt a little high, and I understand why you want to buy it down, I have no confidence backing Atlanta on the road with their quarterback situation. Now that it's at 3, I'm going to consider laying it with the Saints. Just want to wait a little bit and see if it looks like it might even tip down to 2.5 at some parts. So 2.5, love the Saints.
Interesting thing I saw from Clev TA, the analytics guru, talking about Dennis Allen and how good a defensive coach he is. When he faces a team for the second time, they have gone under their team total about 80% of the time, because he makes the defensive adjustments. And like you talked about, probably are not going to run wild the second time around. So yeah, I kind of agree with you, but I'm staying off this game at the moment. We have a huge slate to get to, but first, let's hear from one of our sponsors.
Out there are 2 colossal beings, both forces of nature in their own regard. But in here, as soon as the chute bursts open, the duality of man and beast begins to fade. This is the PBR on CBS Sports Network.
Browns visiting the Bengals. This line totally reflects the fact that the Browns are playing next week in the playoffs. The Browns are locked in. They are going to rest everyone. The Bengals have looked pretty good. Or let me ask you, RJ, has Jake Browning, has the bloom come off, or was he, somewhat decent against the Chiefs?
I don't know that I call him decent. I think the kind of jury's still out on him. He's not as good as the guy that he showed up in that 3-week stretch where he was beating teams. And he's probably not as bad as he looked the last couple of weeks. But whether that you even that out and it makes him a starter caliber quarterback, I'm not really sure in this game. I would have put this line at, I believe I had it at Cleveland -2.5 if they were trying, if everybody was going full out. So this is an 8.5 point adjustment for me now that it's ballooned up to 6. That feels about right. It's funny, you talk about, Lamar Jackson, probably the MVP at this point. So the downgrade to Tyler Huntley, it's got to be worth more than just about anybody in the league, right? Well, I don't know. You go from Joe Flacco to PJ Walker, who has shown time and again that, probably not an NFL caliber quarterback, and he's going to be the guy taking passes here. I don't even think that the Cincinnati defense is going to have that much issue, limiting him, even though they've been awful most of the year. They were awful against Kansas City, even though they largely kept him out of the end zone. It was a bunch of field goals. They gave up 7 yards per play to a struggling offense and had blow-up games for Pacheco and Rice in that game. So even though the Cleveland defense can struggle on the road, they gave up 5.3 yards per play at home to Trevor Siemian-led Jets last week. It was, an easy win for them there. So I'm, with them resting people, I'm not confident they're going to completely slow down Browning. I get why this number is the way it is. And I don't know that Walker's going to score a bunch of points here. So not really something I want to play. I was on the Bengals a little bit when it was a little bit lower number, 4.5, I think is where it opened. Now that it's at 6, it's probably just going to be a stay away.
Yeah, and the Bengals also benefited from Kansas City receivers dropping the ball, which is, what they do every week. But that could have been a lot worse than 25-17 with how many times the Chiefs were in the red zone. Let's move to another divisional matchup. And this one I am sweating because I have the Patriots under 2.5 division wins. And I think they're going to get me here. I really do, because they've played hard, they've played competitive. Bailey Zappi, he probably should have been pulled after all of those interceptions, but once he settled down, he wasn't that bad. They had a chance to beat the Bills in the fourth quarter. So to me, this game, especially with Bill Belichick's status kind of hanging over it, to me, it's going to be Patriots or nothing. What about you?
Yeah, nothing at stake for either team, so it's hard to know who shows up. New England has looked competitive in recent weeks. You typically don't have to worry about Bill Belichick teams checking out, even if, it's a lost season for them. It was an awful start for their offense after the interceptions. Eventually got to 5.5 yards per play against a Buffalo defense that's been playing well and getting a little bit more healthy at this point. So a decent spot for Bailey Zappi again for the last couple of weeks. even with this Jets defense, which can be elite when they're trying really hard, you think he might be able to have some success here at home. And this Patriots defense, they can shut down the Jets offense if they show up. So we'll see if that happens, if everybody's focused, if you don't expect Belichick to be distracted about his future. He kind of made that clear in the press this week, that he's just focused on the game like he always is, week in and week out. And if they show up in this game, I agree that New England can win this game here. I'm just not willing to really lay the points. It was 2.5. It's starting to come down to 2 at some spots. So I don't really, my issue in such a low scoring game with backing New England here is that I take it just about any kicker over Chad Ryland right now. He is not kicking well. He seems to miss. I believe it's been since week 9 since he's had a game where he has made all his kicks in a game. And I think there might've been one game where he didn't even have any kicks. I think they got shut out in that Chargers game, but he's good for a miss every week at this point. And in such a low scoring competitive game, tight spread, is that going to be what does it? So if you're playing this game, I say maybe throw it in a teaser with the Jets while you can still get it up above 7, because we know the points are so much more valuable in these low total games. And I don't expect either of these teams to go out and win the game by more than a touchdown. My problem just in general in teasing this week is the motivation factor. You don't know who's going to completely show up. This could be a week where these bad teams just get shut down, even by other bad teams, and they just don't play or perform, and they score, anywhere from 0 to 6 points in a game. So if I'm playing, and it's going to be a teaser, but I need to have faith that the Jets are going to show up in this game.
Super low total. There is wet weather forecast for the East Coast, so we want to check that as we get closer to kickoff. Again, we're recording this Tuesday afternoon. Zach in the chat asked, what about the Patriots tanking to get a better draft pick? I don't see that happening because players, I think usually are trying their best. And from a management perspective, I don't think that's in Bill Belichick's repertoire. What about you, Arthur?
Yeah, even if we knew he would stay, and there's all this speculation he's going to go. So what does it help him to tank for the Patriots at this point? What does it matter to him? He had his shot with a new quarterback in Mac Jones. He stuck around longer than people might have thought he would stick around after Tom Brady left. And he tried it out with Mac Jones, and it was not successful. And, it seems like he's ready for the next stage of his career, whether it's coaching another team as he chases the wins record, or whether it's going, into retirement. So I don't know that he's, even in the best of times, I don't know that he's really focused on the draft pick at this point of the season, and especially not this year with so much uncertainty ahead of him.
Yeah, moving on, we have the Jaguars looking to clinch the division. They got things figured out. The defense, Josh Allen was unbelievable in that game against the Carolina Panthers. Now they're laying 5.5 on the road. We don't yet know if it's going to be Trevor Lawrence or CJ Beathard, but the team played better with Beathard because the mistakes were gone. Trevor Lawrence wasn't fumbling. He wasn't throwing interceptions, and they didn't need to really extend themselves. And this, to me, is the exact same spot. You don't need to extend yourself to win this game. You just need to run the ball, not turn it over, make a few passes, and you're going to win, because the Titans probably will be Tannehill, it looks like. But to me, they look completely out of gas. They had a nice run. They had the great win over Miami, and that was their Super Bowl. And I think right after that, they packed it in and said, that's the best thing that's going to happen to us all season. So to me, it's going to be Jags or pass. What about you, RJ?
I think I'm kind of the other way. I mean, when you flip the home field, we're kind of equating the Titans to the Panthers right now. And the Panthers are a complete disaster. We see what their owner's doing in the box, but their offense, despite that one game where they flashed something against a very bad Packers defense, they just went right back in the tank in this one, could not do anything against what's been a pretty poor Jaguars defense. And so I don't agree that equating the Titans, coached by Mike Vrabel, can do a little bit on offense in good matchups. I don't agree with equating them with the Panthers in this spot. I don't think the Titans, tuck their tails in and go home. It's not really in Mike Vrabel's nature. And I think they want to avenge the first loss where they lost by 20 in the first meeting. Levis had good stats in that game. They fell behind 27-0, completely dominated. They need to prove going forward that they can compete with this team. So I think that they're gonna show up here. I disagree with it inflating. I kind of want Lawrence to be out there because he doesn't look effective when he's not 100%. And I do think he's going to be out there. I mean, he's been a warrior playing through injuries a lot of the time. Saw it earlier in the season. We expected him to sit, and he came back from, I believe it was a high ankle sprain, without missing a game. Was not able to do it this time, but with the season on the line, you need a win. You need a win. because the other two teams in your division are playing each other and you're all tied. I think he's going to do what he needs to get out there, and I don't think that's beneficial for the team. They're not going to say no. He's the franchise quarterback. So I hope it gets to 6 because I want to wait till 6 and try to back the Titans. But either way, I think I'm going to be on the Titans on the spot and expect it to be another low-scoring game. I mean, they did it. They had a close game, and they almost won last year in the same spot when they were playing for a playoff spot, and they had Josh Dobbs at quarterback against Trevor Lawrence and a hot Jaguars team. I don't see why they couldn't make some noise here and keep this one close too.
Do you need Will Levis to play the Titans because his status is uncertain?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's not like they're not going to, if we knew it was going to be Malik Willis, I'd be a little more hesitant. But if Ryan Tannehill's the guy, he wants to go out, prove that he's still a starting quarterback in this league, convince somebody to give him a starting shot next year. So it's not like he's not going to be motivated to come out and play well. He obviously knows the offense. He's been there all season. Has a lot of playing time under his belt. I think he can lead the charge against the Jaguars team. Despite last week, not really impressive on the season. Do worry about those Tennessee tackles. They looked awful, against, like you said, Will Anderson earlier. And we saw what Josh Allen could do. So a little bit worried about that. But I think they can score enough points to make it happen. And I think the defense will show up here too.
All right. Well, RJ, you've given us one official pick so far on the Ravens plus 3.5. We're going to get to your second official pick. Now, we each have 3 official picks for the show. This comes in the Vikings-Lions game. Dan Campbell's going to play his guys, even though they have a very slim shot to get that number 2 seed. The Vikings, I mean, it is just fallen apart. We assume it will be Nick Mullins, but they have not announced it at this point. Lions laying 3. RJ, how are you going to attack it?
Yeah, what's interesting is that once that came out, the report came out that it seemed like he was going to play his starters, the market jumped up with the Lions, and they completely backed the Lions. The line boosted, I believe, in the 5 to maybe 6 range. And all of a sudden on Tuesday now, it's come back down, and we're seeing them at 3. So I don't know if the market is not buying into that talk. I don't know if they're maybe thinking that the starters do play but don't play a whole game. And that's kind of where I'm going with my play. My best bet is Detroit minus 2.5 on the first half line. So if Detroit is coming out and playing hard, I think that they could evaluate how the situation is in the other games that matter to them at halftime. And if they're going the way that we think they're going to go with the Cowboys massive favorites against Washington, and they're kind of blocked out of that 2 seed, then they use that opportunity to rest some guys, don't play the full 60 minutes because you got to go out and play next week anyway. So I think the first half is the way to attack this game with Detroit, because I would make them massive favorites against the Vikings if we knew they were playing hard anyway. I might make them double-digit favorites like in that Baltimore game just because of the mess at the Vikings quarterback situation, throwing guys in and out, don't know who's going to play over and over again, and whoever it is capable of turning the ball over, not assured of scoring points, even against a struggling Detroit pass defense, which actually has played a little bit better the last few weeks. So I think the starters play the first half. I love laying them at minus 2.5 before the line goes back up and that line creeps over 3.5. I just think it's a good value to play it at 2.5 here.
While we're on the topic of the Lions, I know it doesn't have to do with Week 18, but maybe it does in a way. Do you agree that once that penalty is called, you have to kick the extra point against Dallas and tie the game?
Yeah, I think unless you absolutely need the 2 points, there's no reason to think that you have to go for it from the 7 in that situation. So I definitely kick it and go to overtime there. I just think that was his emotions getting the best of him in a play that he knew he explained beforehand. And he was so mad about it. He just, was pig-headed about it and went out there and kept on going. If cooler heads would have prevailed, I think he would have kicked it and went to overtime.
And look how stubborn the NFL is, assigning that same crew, Brad Allen's crew, to Ravens Steelers. People were saying they should, be given time off. They shouldn't ref another game. Well, here they are reffing the very first game of the week, and it does have playoff implications. Any comment on that?
I'd like to see what your ref article says about these officials. My comment on that is I think that's a clear play for the Steelers to win the game. I think it would benefit viewership if the Steelers are in the playoffs, frankly. So if they have a shot to get there, I'm not going to accuse anybody of doing anything to justify that. But that was the first thing I thought is, good job, Steelers. If I like the Steelers, which I don't, I'd be more confident in them with this crew playing that game and, being in that game and knowing they're not at they're the top level at the best of times and some things can sneak through. So,
yeah. And that I think some of the criticism of the officiating this season has been overblown, but that specific crew has blown, I believe it's now 3 end of game scenarios. They also had that penalty differential of 10-0 with the Eagles and the Dolphins. A lot of curious things going on. All right, we got to move on. Bucks at Panthers. The Bucks really played horrible, but I think it was a lot of the turnovers, and the turnover luck had been going their way. It had been going against the Saints, and then it all flipped in that game. Mayfield had driven them down. They were getting close to making it a competitive game, and then he throws a pretty bad pick. Now they play the Panthers, who look like a completely dead team, as you mentioned before. To me, again, it's going to probably be Bucks or nothing. What about you?
Yeah, I think I got to lean to the Bucks here, even though the line might be a little bit inflated for me. In terms of my power ratings, actually, I probably make it 6. So maybe there's a little bit of value there, but I think you only really play Tampa. Their defense played well against New Orleans, gave up just 4.4 yards per play, but the offense was a no-show for most of the game and turning the ball over. And they got back on track a little bit at the end. But I think they'll erase that from their minds, come out, win this game, get to the playoffs here. Carolina's offense went right back in the tank after one good game. I cannot expect them to score much, especially when you can't rely on the run in this game against a good rush defense, because that's really the only way that Carolina has moved the ball consistently, aside from that Green Bay game. The defense, I've been impressed by the Carolina defense over the most of the back half of the second half of the season, and they've fallen off the last 2 weeks, dealing with a lot of injuries. We'll see how that injury report looks, because if some of these guys are missing on the back end, guys like J.C. Horn dealing with injury, this Tampa Bay pass offense can be dangerous, and they can put up a bunch of points in a hurry. So at this line here, I'm only really looking to lean at Tampa. Might play it at 5 or 5.5. Once it gets to 6, probably going to back away, even though I feel like it's kind of an easy 20-10 win for Tampa.
We got a great question from the chat, and we're going to get into that right after we hear from one of our sponsors.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
The question was about Terry McLaurin needing 54 yards to reach a milestone, a contract incentive, and that comes up in this next game where you have the Commanders playing the Cowboys. The Cowboys are 13-point favorites. But before we get into that game, RJ, were you aware of what happened on Twitter this week when there was an account that listed all the various incentives to watch? I think it was like 15 or 18, and he was basically telling you these are going to be edges in props, but the props weren't out yet. So there was a big backlash saying, why are you giving that info? Well, I believe the sports books have that info already, so I don't think it was a big deal either way. What's your comment on that being released early? And if coaches, teams are aware of it, are they trying to not pay out these bonuses? There's just a lot of angles to look at. Obviously, the players want to get it for themselves. The teammates want to get it for them. But the coaches can also, and management could reduce snaps if they're aware of it.
Yeah, not aware of what happened on Twitter. I don't think it matters. I think the books obviously know what happens. They do their research before they set these lines, so they're going to set the lines with that knowledge anyway. And we've seen it in the past in these last game of the season things where lines are sometimes a little bit skewed, and you wonder why. And then you go and you check, and you're like, oh, okay, it's an incentive-based kind of play that they're playing on here. In terms of motivation, I do believe it is a major factor for players and even for coaches, because it's not like the coaches are signing the checks. They want to get make their guys happy and show that they've got their players' backs, and they talk about it all season, and they try to get on these guys' side all season and preach family and everything. So if you can get a guy a little bit of a bonus, you go out and do it. So we've seen coaches dial up, run after run for guys that need it, dial up a bunch of targets for guys that need it in the game plan that week. And, that could happen here. I expect Eric Bieniemy would want to get him that because it seems like Eric Bieniemy would be that type of coach. I'm unaware of how the rest of the coaching staff is managing this week, knowing 99% chance this is their last week with the team. So I wonder if guys are updating resumes and kind of putting feelers out to see what might be available. But no, I think McLaurin will probably get there in this matchup. They're going to be behind a ton. The line is projected at 13.5 now. If I knew Brissett was playing and Washington was trying hard and their coaches weren't distracted, I'd probably make it as low as like 8.5. And at 13, if Brissett is playing, hurt, I still kind of want to back Washington, but I would need him because I'm not really confident in Howell doing it. Thinking Dallas is going to score a ton of points here. Over 29.5 team total on Dallas is my best bet in this game. They routed Washington 45-10 in the first meeting. Washington has given up 30 points in more than half of their games this year, 9 out of 16. I just don't see why defense is all of a sudden going to show up and hold Dallas under 30 points. So give me the team total over 29.5 for my next best bet.
I like that play a lot, RJ, and I think I could speak for both of us when we say that was so deflating when Jacoby Brissett came up with that injury late in the week, because we both jumped on the Commanders early in that game, early in the week at 13 and a half, even 14 you could have gotten. And then he gets hurt Thursday. I believe it came out Friday that he was hurt. And then, of course, he doesn't suit up. Sam Howell actually kept us in the game with the shot to cover a lot longer than I thought he would against the 49ers. But yeah, I think the Cowboys put up a ton of points. I don't know if they cover this number, but obviously they win. They get the number 2 seed and they win the division. Okay, Rams at 49ers. This one is very interesting because the 49ers are locked into the number 1 seed. Christian McCaffrey will not play. That's already been announced. But the Rams are locked into a playoff berth. But I think 6 versus 7 means a lot. But some of the speculation is that it doesn't mean so much, and that Sean McVay may not be playing everyone because he'd rather be safe in terms of injury. But I think the matchup being the 6 seed is much better than the 7. Don't you agree?
I'm not sure I agree. I think the Lions might be playing better than what we saw from this Cowboys team and the Eagles, if the Eagles could get there.
But I just want to interrupt for a second because the Rams did go to Dallas already, and they got absolutely destroyed. I feel they should believe more in themselves against Detroit.
I think they believe they can beat anyone. They're playing a lot better now than they were earlier in the season. And, I think that they are going to rest some starters. I don't think there is benefit to them locking it up. This line probably tells you that they're not going to rest starters, although if we knew they weren't, I think they would be favored, just like Pittsburgh is, because I think the gap between these two teams is smaller with how well the Rams are playing right now. I'd probably make it 8.5, 9 if San Francisco was playing everyone. They're obviously going to rest some people. Again, you can't rest everyone. The whole defense isn't going to start. This isn't the preseason where you get 90 guys on your roster. So guys are going to play. Some of the starters aren't going to play as much. Guys that are deemed up, like McCaffrey, isn't going to play. Trent Williams probably won't play. And that is going to make a difference. But it really just comes down to how much the Rams are going to play their guys. So if you think that they're not going to play them that much, or you get some word that they're leaning that way, you want to hammer the 49ers, because I like their backups more in this game. I think Darnold's capable of running Shanahan's system with solid running backs, hand it off, put up some points there. And Carson Wentz is the backup on the other side, hadn't been with the team all year, not really confident in his ability to do anywhere near what Matthew Stafford's doing. So I think that would really benefit San Francisco here. So I think 3 is probably the right spot for it to sit right now without knowing what the Rams will do. But I feel it's in their best interest to rest guys and then just deal with what happens 6 or 7. Because even if they go out and win this game, I think they still might get the 7 seed. It really depends on what happens around them to what happens. Or maybe they are locked in the 6 seed at that point. I don't know. Or they could get the 6 seed while losing the game. So I think it's really just based on what happens in these other scenarios that it's just too much to worry about, and just take the rest and get ready for next week.
Well, one team that technically has a lot to play for is the Eagles, but I believe that we're going to see the Eagles resting players against the Giants. Maybe not in the first drive, but very soon thereafter, because I think the Cowboys are going to jump on the Commanders. The Eagles are going to know they have no shot to win the NFC East. And I like the Giants. This is my first official play for the show. The Giants are playing good football right now. Tyrod Taylor is attacking deep, which I don't think anyone would have thought. But an 80-yard touchdown, a 69-yard touchdown. They had a big breakdown in the New York Post about how his ADOT has been much deeper than Daniel Jones. So for some reason, it might be that he has better protection. The offensive line is healthier. This team is playing hard down the stretch for Brian Daboll, getting 5.5 points at home against an Eagles team that is in real disarray right now. It's not just A.J. Brown who's moping around, but Hassan Reddick is upset. There's some turmoil in that locker room, and I think what they need to do is just rest the guys and get ready for a playoff run, because most likely this game is not going to mean anything. And if Nick Sirianni gets somebody hurt a la Brandon Staley last year when there was no reason to play anyone. But if he gets somebody hurt and the Cowboys are up 21-0, 28-0, they can't afford to lose anybody on this defense, which is already getting, ripped apart every single week. So I'm on the Giants plus 5.5. RJ, do you agree?
I do like the Giants. Got it first thing Monday at 6.5 at a place put up. That number made it seem like the Eagles are better, or at least equal to the Rams, because that's what the line was last week. Rams at Giants, when I like the Giants in that spot too. And I don't think the Eagles are better than the Rams right now. I kind of disagree that they're going to rest starters. I don't think they can afford to with how they're playing, because they do not look like a playoff team right now. And they need to get their act together, and they need to get some momentum going into the postseason, because if you rest guys now, don't take this game seriously, you're going to show up to whoever you're playing, the Tampa Bay or whoever it is in that division, be favored in that game and lose it by 20 with the way you're playing. So I think they need to put something positive together on both sides of the ball. I am shocked at a defense that suddenly has more involvement with Matt Patricia is not doing well. He's doing a great job calling plays for a defense that has allowed 30 yards at least on every drive in the last 6 quarters they played, with the exception of Tyrod Taylor's first drive, which started on Philadelphia's 14 and was 3 plays and a touchdown. So not a successful drive there. And the other exception is 16 seconds left in the first half. The Cardinals got the ball back and obviously did not get 30 yards there. They just kind of ran the clock out there. Other than that, Philly defense has been atrocious. And Taylor is capable of hitting those big plays. I think that fits into what Brian Daboll wants to do. We're talking to Dan Schneier, who's on the fantasy editorial team. He just thinks he's a good fit for what Brian Daboll wants to do offensively, better than what Daniel Jones has been, and not capable of making some of those throws there or doing the processing that's needed, while Tyrod Taylor is capable of doing that. So I like this offense better with Taylor at quarterback. Even though they did struggle to move the ball consistently last week, I don't think they're going to have that issue against this defense. I don't know how low it has to be for me not to not like the Giants, but 5.5 sure isn't it. So I would still play the Giants at 5.5 if you didn't get it on Monday. I've moved the rating way down on Philly, and I think the line still should be -5, which tells me I probably haven't moved it down low enough, because that defense needs to show up here in this game and show that they're capable of making a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, and a lot of books have already moved to 5, and kudos for you for getting 6.5, because 6 is a key number, and let's hope it doesn't end on 6 for my sake. And then another official play for me in this next game, another divisional rivalry, the Bears at Green Bay. Green Bay needs to win to get in. All the pressure is on Green Bay. I love this spot for the Bears. They never win in Lambeau. They're going to put everything into this game to ruin the Packers season. I think we remember what happened last year with the Lions doing it to the Packers. I think the same exact thing could happen here. Look at the Bears, 6-1-1 over their last 8 against the spread, and the only loss was they were getting 2.5 and lost by 3 in one of those games. The defense has been outstanding. Justin Fields played a tremendous game, both running and passing. I just think everything is pointing up. I see no reason to jump off the Bears bandwagon. The only thing I'm worried about is if Jalen Johnson can't go. That does hurt a little bit, but will Jaden Reed play? And he was the key guy for the Packers. So I'm all over the Bears. I would love to get 3.5. There are a few 3.5s out there, but for the books that we had on SportsLine available, I posted +3. RJ, what do you think?
And I've been holding out for 3.5, hoping we get it. I don't know that it's going to come off 3 the other direction, so I'm kind of patiently waiting. But we'll see how the injury report looks. If it starts to look really bad for the Packers, maybe it does come off, because they're just walking wounded on the offensive side, with Jaden Reed now hurt, and the Chicago defense playing very well. I think they're playing like a top 5 or 8 defense over the second half of the season, once they got Montez Sweat and they got healthy on the back end. And I think they're able to limit this Packers offense, who Jordan Love has played really well. I think that they have a franchise quarterback in place with him, and he's faced some adversity with all these injuries going on around him. And I think people are surprised that they're making a playoff run here and have a chance to make the playoffs with him. So I think they're good to go with Jordan Love. I just don't know that this is a great spot for him against a motivated Chicago team, wants to come out, ruin the Packers season here. Then a long-time punching bag for them, and go into the offseason off a very positive note in the second half here. And their defense did struggle a bit against Atlanta, but they gave up 4 yards per play aside from that long Algier screen touchdown we talked about. So I think the defense will step up here for Chicago. Packers are capable of just, completely throwing up a goose egg on defense. We saw it against Carolina. So if that Chicago offense shows up here and scores 20, I think they can win this game. I think they're the better team right now. So if I can get 3.5, I'm going to play it. I probably will still play it at 3. I'm a little wary about Green Bay's home field advantage, one of the best in the league, especially late in the season. So that would give me a little bit of pause, but probably going to be on Chicago either way. Just want that hook.
Over the last 6 games, the Bears given up 15 points per game. This defense has been incredible since Montez Sweat came back or got traded to them, and since they started getting healthy. Another game with a field goal spread. The Seahawks laying a field goal at Arizona. One team couldn't have looked better offensively in the Cardinals, and one team couldn't have looked worse defensively in the Seahawks. When you give up 30 to Pittsburgh, you've hit an all-time low defensively. RJ, to me, I would say Cardinals are pass.
When they gave up 202 rushing yards to Pittsburgh, and Arizona had 221 rush yards against Philly. So you'd figure that matchup benefits Arizona and they can have success here. The question is, do they get up for this game? They put together a massive upset for a game that they were massive underdogs, double-digit underdogs at home in that game. They won it. A little bit of positivity going into the offseason. I don't know that they get up for this game in the same way. And a lot of these teams that seem to be checked out, it seems like people are betting against them, and these lines are inflating, but not with the Cardinals, just based on what they saw last week. But that was against a very flawed Philly team that we just talked about. I think Seattle is the better team here. I think 3 is the right number. I see a 2.5 on the board though, and I kind of want to play the Seahawks at 2.5. Their offense was great against Pittsburgh, 7.5 yards per play. But that was a mix of being awesome with 5 scoring drives and awful with 3 punts and 1 quick fumble here. I think they'll do better against this Cardinals team that isn't going to get up for this game with Jonathan Gannon, like as it were last week with Jonathan Gannon in that revenge spot against Philly. So I'm going to fade Arizona coming off a win. Probably want to get that 2.5 to do it. And probably once we get off of this podcast, I'm going to go put that in on SportsLine because I do see it available at 1 book right now.
Antonio Pierce is 4-4 as the interim coach of the Raiders. Got a fraudulent cover against the Colts. Probably didn't deserve that cover there. But he's done a good job. But the feeling is that he may not have done enough. So I think you're going to get a huge motivational spot for the Raiders at home, trying to get their guy the full-time job. And they need to get this win to kind of prove it to Mark Davis. So to me, I'm going to be looking only at the Raiders when I break down this game in more detail. I don't want to be on the Broncos here. I'm not saying I'm already playing the Raiders, but to me, that's the only way I could look. RJ, what about you?
Well, it's kind of a prove-it spot for both teams. You mentioned the Antonio Pierce stuff, and the players, especially on defense, seem to be rallying around him. The offense played well 2 of the last 3 games, so maybe they're coming around a little bit. Aiden O'Connell doesn't look like the complete zero he's looked like in a lot of games, so maybe that there is something there. But I think on the Denver side, there's still some proof of concept that Sean Payton wants to exhibit and saying, I don't need Russell Wilson. I don't need the high-priced quarterback. You give me a guy that I want. I can go out and execute. So if he can come out with Jarrett Stidham and put together a great game here, I think it really breeds confidence in moving forward without Russell Wilson. So I think he's going to try hard. It's not a situation where they're going to try to give up on the season, because I think there's still something that Peyton needs to prove, and he's under pressure to prove it after all this drama with Russell Wilson. And so we'll see. Vegas, we know the beginning of the season, a lot of optimism for Denver with Sean Payton, and Vegas went in there and upset them to start the Denver underperformance narrative. I can see another close, low-scoring game here. Don't know who's going to win. Kind of want to play the under at 38, expecting a better defensive game on both sides than offensive game. So if I'm going to play it, it's probably going to be the under, but kind of want to look how the injury reports look for both teams at this time of year.
Before we get into the 2 final games of the Week 18 slate, I want to shout out John in the chat. He has made it to Week 18 in the DK Survivor. He is in line for a big, big payout. John, if you could type in what are the choices that you have for Week 18. And again, I'm super jealous because RJ and I were in one for 1.3 million, and we went out on the Steelers losing at home to Arizona. I'm not bitter about losing the quarterback, about losing the linebacker in that game and messing up 4th and goal from the 1. I'm not bitter about that at all. So John, let's at least live vicariously through you and take down this DraftKings survivor pool. Who do you have left? And as we get on to that, we want to look at the Chiefs and the Chargers. There's no mystery here. The Chiefs are sitting everyone, and the Chargers are laying 2. Easton Stick is laying 2 points in a football game, RJ.
Yeah, just for John, I think a lot of people are going to be on Cincy with the expectation that Cleveland is going to bench everybody. A lot of people are going to have Cincy left. So I think if you want to go for the higher prize, I would avoid Cincy and play one of these other options. We talked about Chicago as a pretty solid option there. That might be the one I go with. Jacksonville will be tempting, but as I said, I'm worried about the Titans. But I'm probably going with Chicago in that spot, just with how they're playing, and expect them to come out and get the upset there at Green Bay and hope that I get so much. I know it's going to be scary. You don't want to take an underdog there, but imagine the equity that happens with a bunch of people get knocked out with that Cincy game. So if you don't want to go with that much risk there, maybe take one of these other smaller favorites here like the Saints rather than going with the team that everybody's going to take in Cincy. So that's my thought on the survivors. Chiefs and Chargers, I think it's interesting. We know the Chiefs are going to rest their starters. It's got this game up to 3. But with the Chiefs resting their starters, don't they look like the Chargers? I mean, it's Easton Stick versus Blaine Gabbert. Gabbert might be the better quarterback there. It's whoever the Chargers, Alex Erickson, I think it was, at receiver, doing all the work there for them if Josh Palmer doesn't play. Is that really any worse than what Kansas City is going to be throwing out there? So I don't know. I think Chiefs are the better team with the better coaching staff, obviously. Chargers ready to get out of a lost season where the coach got fired. I don't think that they're going to hold Gabbert to 10 points or so. I think the running game can work. I think the Chiefs defense has enough depth and has enough people that are going to have to play in this game that they're going to limit the Chargers scoring. We see a very low total here. Now that it's at 3, love taking the 3 with the Chiefs because I don't expect them to get blown out.
And John also has the Saints that are appealing. He has a lot of appealing options for Week 18. It's kind of like the board reopens up for you in Week 18 because you have several teams that aren't going to be playing their starters. But Bengals is very attractive. The Saints is attractive to me. And even the Patriots, against those pathetic Jets at home and possibly Bill Belichick's final game. So a lot of great options. John, make sure to keep us posted because I want to be pulling for your pick on Sunday. Sunday Night Football, we are going to get to right now. And this is my third official play. And I am sure RJ is going to be hopping on board with me because I'm backing his Buffalo Bills to get it done, lay the field goal. Kind of a surprising line when you look at the line just on the fact that they have the same basic record and you're in Miami and you're laying 3. That tells you how bad the Dolphins injury situation is without Chubb, without Jalen Waddle, without Xavier Howard now not expected to play. And the guys that were opposite Jalen Ramsey, including Eli Apple, got absolutely torched last week. I think the Bills can clean it up. They didn't look good on New England. I think that's helping us with this line. If they had blown out New England, 41-10, which they probably should have with all the turnovers they got, I think we'd be laying over a field goal here. So, RJ, I am all in on the Bills this week because they've won 4 straight. They had a lot of bad luck earlier in the season with injuries, but now Rasul Douglas has helped that defense. They can get a pass rush. Both quarterbacks a little bit dinged up and both coaches saying nothing to worry about here. But I think there's more worry about Tua than Josh Allen.
If you think I'm going to back this play of Bills -3, you do not know me at all. It's an eternal Buffalo pessimist here. I just cannot get behind this line being 3 with the Dolphins team that, has a better record than them, plays well at home typically, and needs this for the number 2 seed. They're still a good team. I know they're dealing with injuries, and that's why the line is the way it is. It's the only way to justify the line because I think these teams are close in power ratings, and with the home field advantage, I think Miami should be laying 2.5, 3 points if we weren't worried about the injury. So the question is, the total sum of the injuries, is it worth 5.5, 6 points? Probably not for me. This is still a really good coaching staff. I think a much better coaching staff than what's in Buffalo. I mean, you think back to last year and that Skylar Thompson wildcard game, they almost pulled out the win there. It was a very close game, 3 points at the end. And they can make it work with what they need to happen, knowing who's going to be available for this game going in. You talk about the cornerbacks getting roasted for them outside of Jalen Ramsey. Well, Buffalo's receivers aren't known for their consistency outside of Stephon Diggs, who I know kind of wants to be a bigger focus of this offense anyway. So Ramsey's kind of largely taking him out. It might have to do more with the 2 run games taking over here. And we'll see what happens there. Miami's in this very weird spot where they're at home. They're the leading team right now, and they get to play the nobody believes in us card because they're catching 3 points at home against the Bills as home dogs. So I just could not lay 3 with Buffalo here. If I played, it's going to be the Dolphins. If it gets to 3.5, I'll have to think about it. Otherwise, it's probably going to be a stay away. And if you want to take some piece of this game, I wouldn't take the spread. I would take, if you think Buffalo is going to dominate with these injuries on the defensive side, maybe you just take their team total over. But I think Mike McDaniel might have something cooked up his sleeve here, and I'm not willing to trust the Bills laying 3 points in Miami right now.
You make a good case. It was 48-20 in the first meeting. I'm going to read you a set of numbers and ask if you know what these numbers are, RJ. 4-4-2-2-2, 3-4-3-2-3-2. Any idea what those are relating to this rivalry?
Those sound like they could be like, I don't know, takeaways, turnover type of things. Other than that, I don't know. Maybe the
Josh Allen touchdown passes versus the Dolphins in his career. 31 touchdowns against 5 interceptions. He's never had a game where he hasn't thrown for multiple touchdowns against the Dolphins. So even though that Dolphins defense has gotten a lot better with Vic Fangio, but with the injuries, I think Josh Allen is going to dice it up.
Well, it doesn't matter who's out there on the field for Miami if Josh Allen is throwing some of these throws that he's thrown in some of these games. I mean, anybody could have intercepted some of those passes against New England, I think. It's just he's capable of these dumb interceptions at times and these giveaways that you just wouldn't expect from a guy of his caliber. He is definitely an MVP caliber type of talent week in and week out. And these mistakes just ruin them. So if you're buying Buffalo at the top of the market, I just worry about that critical interception that Josh Allen, he's dying to throw. He every single game, you can just picture those passes that he throws, and you're like, what are you doing, man? You should be blowing out this team. And all of a sudden, you're only beating the Patriots by 6, and they have a chance to win the game, even though Bailey Zappi completely, threw up all over himself for a quarter of that game, and Buffalo somehow still could not blow them out. So I don't know. It's just I don't have that much faith in Josh Allen to just go out, execute, put up all the touchdown numbers you're talking about without putting the ball at risk, even against questionable talent on the back end. I think that this coaching staff and his ability to make mistakes will make this game a little bit closer than people expect.
Final question, because there has been some talk about the Bills could miss the playoffs if they lose this game, and a couple other things happen. There was a question in the chat about whether that might be in the Ravens' interest because Buffalo looks like the most dangerous team in the AFC besides Baltimore. In fact, the Bills are the third favorite right now, 8-1 to win the Super Bowl. Your comments or thoughts on that scenario?
Yeah, I think it's tough to try to play that game with the Ravens. I think you just got to have confidence with how you're playing. You're going to beat anyone right now. And so if it's Buffalo, you're going to play them at home. So I don't think they're too worried about trying to lose Buffalo's way out of the playoffs, if that's the case, because Buffalo could just go out and win the game anyway. So, and they're favored to win the game. So what does it matter if you're the Ravens at that point? They're the 2 seed anyway.
All right, well, let's get to a recap of our best bets. RJ had 3, I had 3. RJ, take it away.
I like the Ravens plus 3.5. That line has swung way too much for me, especially with the depth on this Ravens defense. I think it'll be a close, low-scoring game. They blew out the Steelers in a similar situation a few years back as the number 1 seed, resting players. They could win this game easily again. I have the Lions first half minus 2.5. I believe Dan Campbell when he says he's going to play starters. I do think he can evaluate what's going on in other games at halftime and then maybe rest some guys, which is why the line is only 3. But in the first half, he's going to go hard, and that Lions team is so much better than the Vikings that I think they'll cover the 2.5 first half line. I have the Cowboys team total over 29.5. Don't see how the Commanders hold them under 30, which they have only done to 7 of 16 opponents this year. Cowboys scored 45 in that first meeting. Could be a similar total here for a team that needs to win to get the number 2 seed.
And I'm on the Bears like I am every week, 6-1-1 against the number in the last 8. The only one they didn't, that they had an ATS loss, was by a half a point, and I think they want to spoil the Packers season. The Bills, we talked about it. They're trending in the right direction. The Dolphins are just so banged up, and Josh Allen always seems to shred the Dolphins defense like we talked about. 31 touchdowns and 5 picks against Miami in his career. And then the Giants plus 5.5 against a dysfunctional Eagles team that's kind of quarreling with itself, bickering with itself. And once they see the scoreboard and it's 21-0 Cowboys, the Eagles might pull their starters. I think the Giants could come through the back door with Tyrod Taylor. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for NFL Week 18. We will be back at the same time next week looking at those 6 playoff games. But tomorrow we'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern with the Early Edge. RJ, thanks so much. We'll see you soon.